the XS Noize Podcast with Mark Millar.
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 42 of the XS Noize Music Podcast. I'm your host, my name is Mark Millar, and this week my guest is multi-instrumentalist Saul Davies from James. We will be talking about the band's 16th studio album, All the Colours of You. If you missed last week's episode, I was joined by the Killer's founding member and guitarist Dave Cooney. We talked about his second solo album, A Mild Case of Everything, and much more. So check it out, and if you like the podcast, it would be amazing if you subscribed and shared with your friends. If you want up-to-date music news, album reviews and interviews, then check out our main website at xsnoize.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. Here's XS Noize writer Dan Lynch with some highlights of what's on the website this week.
All the Colours of You is the new album from James. It's the 16th studio album from the band, most famous for their 1991 hit single, Sit Down. Sandra Blemster gives the album an 8 out of 10 review, saying it's quirky, challenging and dark, but ultimately optimistic. Randall Radich has spoken to San Diego-based band Just Goody. Fronted by Justin Goodman, the band tracks the influence of R&B, reggae and traditional Hebrew music in their sound, and they speak about their latest single, Thing to Do. Finally this week, Michael Barron takes a peek inside the new book by Ed Luce. It's called Woveable Oath. The graphic novel centres around Gotblood, an extremely hairy wrestler who loves heavy metal music. Michael says Luce has brought an idea to life that seems impossible for anyone else to have conceived. Read the full review at xsnoize.com.
Saul Davies is a British musician best known as a member of the rock band James. Davies is a multi-instrumentalist whose primary instruments are the violin, guitar and percussion. Saul joined James for their 1990 breakthrough album Goldmother. I sat down with Saul to talk about joining the band, his musical influences and the latest James release, All the Colours of You. So sit back, relax and enjoy the XS Noize Music Podcast with Saul Davies of James. How's it going, Saul?
Great. Hello.
So you're a multi-instrumentalist whose primary instruments are the violin, guitar and percussion. What was the first instrument you picked up?
It was the violin, really. And I was about 8 years old. Yeah. It was an opportunity to miss a maths lesson if I took up the fiddle, as it's known in Scotland. And since I was shite at maths and didn't have any interest in getting any better, seemed like a good opportunity. So, yeah. I got trained in that a bit, and it was good. Gave me a grounding in sort of some music theory and all that kind of stuff.
And obviously that must have helped when you went on to learn other instruments, such as the guitar.
Not really. It's very different, and it was very separate. And actually, it was Adrian, who now is the other guitar player, and James, who taught me to play guitar when I was 15, 16, when we first met each other. I moved to Hull, where Adrian was. We bumped into each other, and he started teaching me guitar. And I was playing drums anyway, myself. But no, actually, the kind of theoretical side of music is reserved in my case, only reserved for the violin, actually, which is quite interesting. The guitar, I just kind of want to make a noise on. Similarly with the drums, It's a bit less scientific, but equally as effective in a way.
Which one do you enjoy playing the most?
Well, the one I enjoy playing the most is the one I get to play the least in our band, which is the drums, actually. I love playing the drums. I just, I think, and that's the thing about the way I play guitar. I use the guitar as a rhythmical instrument. And I try to play violin rhythmically as well. I think obviously they're also melodic instruments, the guitar and the violin as well. And, but I'm a big fan of rhythm. And it's almost like an unseen element, like we'll go, oh, you're just the rhythm guitar player. You go, well, try and play that. Sounds easy. You go and do it then.
Absolutely. Going back sort of to the start, what sort of music were you listening to growing up that was inspiring you, to play these instruments?
Well, a lot of the kind of real, it would be all the classic artists really, Beatles, Stones, all of that stuff really. Floyd, I'm a massive Floyd fan, and I think so I was really influenced by the way that they made records. I remember very clearly Dark Side of the Moon coming into our house the week it was released, and me just sitting and listening to it again and again and again and again, aged 8 years old or whatever, just going, that's the shit right there. That's something else. I also listened to some other artists that were maybe, people like Tom Waits that my parents were into, which was not, very few people knew about Tom Waits in those days. But and other bands like Little Feat, they're amazing. Lowell George. So just quite a lot of American music that was not necessarily left field, but some of it was left field, I suppose. Beefheart as well. All these records were coming into our house, and I was listening to them. But equally, things like Black Sabbath, early Sabbath and stuff like that, which I still find super exciting. Unbelievable record, amazing. My daughter actually is 14. She's just got into kind of Sabbath, late 60s, early 70s, and it's really interesting.
And you mentioned Dark Side of the Moon. You could stick it on now, and it still sounds equally as amazing, and you get the same enjoyment out of it probably than the first time you've heard it.
Yeah, I think it's the greatest record ever made because it just lives and lives and lives, And within it, there are so many genres of stuff that they either invented or they progressed or they touched on. It's really remarkable record. Mm-hmm. From an English band anyway, certainly. I got into, I have very eclectic tastes. I still think that Colour of Spring by Talk Talk is one of the greatest records ever made and one of the greatest sounding records ever made. You can listen to that record endlessly and just marvel, even technically, at the sound and just go, wow, listen, how did they make that record? I would really like to know how they made that record. They're one of the bands that I really regret never having had the chance to see live, unfortunately. And obviously Mark Hollis died last year or the year before?
Year before.
But then there's a lot of artists out there you think almost counterintuitively that they don't quite get the respect that they're due. It seems mad to say this, but do you think that Simon and Garfunkel get the respect that they're actually due? I don't. I know everybody goes, but Simon and Garfunkel, they're great. Yeah, but do you know how fucking great they are? Go and listen to their music again. It will blow your mind. It's they're another next level, amazing. Yeah. Just outrageous.
I certainly appreciate them because, as you say, your daughter's getting into Black Sabbath. It's probably from hearing you playing it around the house. Growing up, my dad always had Simon and Garfunkel on, so I always have held them in very, very high esteem, and later on, you could hear Simon and Garfunkel and the Stone Roses first album and stuff, so.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, we hear them everywhere. And if you just picked, if you pick a song like The Boxer and just put it on, it'd just blow your mind. It's It's just if that was a new band, everybody would be over it like flies over a lump of shite, wouldn't they? They'd just be like, that's the best thing since the Stone Roses. That's what they would be saying.
Absolutely. But unfortunately, even, I suppose Paul Simon personally doesn't think he gets the same recognition for the band as Simon and Garfunkel, Art Garfunkel does.
Well, balls to him. It's he should, just sing. Just be Simon in Simon and Garfunkel and be happy that you changed the world.
You joined James for the Gold Mother album, but what were you doing before that?
I was working in a pottery, being an apprentice potter.
Well,
that's rock and roll, isn't it?
And what did that involve?
Standing in a freezing empty shed in Hampshire, covered head to toe in slip and glaze, making these beautiful big floor tiles that we made for people. Well, I was being taught how to do it, and it was great. It was physically demanding, which was great. I came out of university with my degree from Manchester, and all very uncool, really, going to university. But whatever, it was great. I got a degree in archaeology and ancient history, so I know a lot about ancient Mesopotamia.
Well,
and it was just purely by mistake that I met Larry, who was at the time the guitar player, and James, and had an opportunity to join them because they were looking for people to work with. And it just really silly little moment, really, of right time, right place, and joined. And we were on tour within 10 days. It was pretty mad, really. And so, then we made that record, Gold Mother, which So Dave, our drummer, and I joined the band in the beginning of March, 89. We did the tour, and then later on in the year, then that's where Mark turned up, a keyboard player, because he turned up to do some keyboard work on the thing, and Andy turned up, and it was like, oh, a trumpet player. And so just like, well, I might as well join the band, off we went.
Up to that date, James had a few albums out, but Gold Mother was it became the band's biggest album to date. The album also featured Sit Down, yes, which is also the biggest James single. How did that feel when you just joined and then all of a sudden the band gets this great success?
I guess everything was such a whirlwind that it didn't really, nothing really computed. It was just like, we're doing a tour, right? We've written some songs, right? We're doing a recording, like, oh, Christ, people are buying the record. It was just one thing very quickly snowballed into another. It was like non-stop, really. So it certainly wasn't part of any master plan at all. And I don't think there was any great sense that, we weren't trying to be successful. It wasn't like that was the goal. The goal was to make music that we wanted to play, and enjoyed. But it just so happened that people were buying it. So it was a bit bonkers, really. And that led on to Seven, which was, Born of Frustration and all that kind of stuff. And
yeah, well, Seven, it's probably, up there with Millionaires is my favorite James album. It's an absolute, masterpiece. And I know you were quite involved with Millionaires as well.
Yeah. The two records, I guess, which I had the most personal, really was Millionaires and also I'm Pleased to Meet You, which I also like as a record. I think it's a great record.
Yeah, another amazing album. James, you're about to release your 16th studio album, All the Colours of You, in June. Did you go into the recording with any preconceived ideas, how it should sound and the kind of songs you wanted to write about?
No, I don't think so. We just did a load of jamming, that was pre the, COVID being a thing and all that. And so we got a bag of demos together, and then COVID appeared, and it was like, well, and nobody, think back 18 months, nobody knew what was going on, did they? Nobody had a clue, really. No, we were just making, as always, just getting in a room and making music that we all just wanted to make with each other and just jammed, I mean, lyrically, things started to shift, stuff happened in the world, and I guess lyrically, that's where some of the lyrical impetus comes from. Tim's the guy that does the lyrics, we do the music. And we were fortunate that, Tim literally kind of bumped into Jackknife Lee. It turns out that they're neighbors. And suddenly we've got one of the world's greatest producers making our record for us. It meant we didn't go to a studio as such, because of course there was no way we could go to America, any of us. It was impossible. So we did a lot of the things remotely. But essentially he used a lot of the jams and the initial parts that we'd come up with as the bedrock and those demos for the productions. And then, we all sent bits and pieces and he did some stuff as well, Jackknife. So it was very much a collaborative effort, I think, in the end. So I suppose the record reflects the time in which we made it, I suppose. Can't escape that. We would have chosen to make a different record, I'm sure. Probably more of a, getting in the studio and playing and together and, capturing that and all the rest of it, but it just simply wasn't an option.
Garrett, he's worked with some amazing artists from U2, R.E.M., Taylor Swift, Snow Patrol. How much did he challenge you during the recording of the album?
Well, because he was using the demos that we'd done as the bedrock for the songs, I guess it was probably less challenging than it would have been if we'd all got in a room and, we almost started from scratch in a way. Certainly, I mean, as the initial results started coming back, where he changed so much of what we were doing, I didn't find the process challenging at all. I found it really fulfilling and really exciting. Actually, I thought it was quite. I'd had an idea, actually, well over a year before COVID had appeared and all the rest of it, that I'd quite like to make a record at some point where we just did a whole load of jamming and just gave those recordings to somebody and said, piece it together for us. It's just a big bag of tricks, of stuff, like a jigsaw. Put it together. Show us what you get. A bit like a remixer does. You send a track off to be remixed. You don't know what you're going to get back. It's great. It's a real collaborative effort. So actually, what I'd kind of hoped might happen in a way, or I looked forward potentially to happening at some point in our career, where somebody really took the realms and almost just took what we'd done and messed about with it, just as an experiment almost as much as anything. Kind of happened, with him. And that was because of the circumstances.
James have a history of working with legendary producers such as Brian Eno, Youth, Flood, and Marcus Draves. Out of those producers, and now Garrett, Jack Knife Lee, which producer's been the most inspiring in the studio?
Oh, they've all have in lots of different ways. Our last record was made by Charlie Andrew. Did all the Alt J stuff. Max Dingle made the 2 records before that, and I found him to be brilliant. He did Girl at the End of the World and La Petite Mort before that with him, and I think he had a big effect on our sound. Eno, of course, is inspiring because he's full of energy and brilliance and all the rest of it. But I found all of those guys to be, one way or another, we learned something working with people of that caliber. Stephen Hague, you didn't mention in that list. He made Millionaires with us, and with occasional interference from Brian Eno. And Mark and I had a lot to say about that record as well. Hague is great. I loved working with Hague. I thought he was super. And actually, if you listen to She's a Star now, it still sounds pretty fresh. Okay. It has a flavor of its time, of course it does. But it's 20, is it? No. How many years old is She's a Star?
It's over 20 years. It was on
96.
Whiplash.
Oh, it was on Whiplash, wasn't it? Yes, sorry. He didn't do Millionaires. He did Whiplash with us. Yeah. So Whiplash, I forgot about that. Yeah, so, I don't know, 96, 25 years old.
It was actually 97.
97, okay.
Yeah.
Almost 25 years old.
Just remembered, yeah.
I really liked his work. I loved his attention to detail. He did tiny little things that you thought didn't make any difference, but kind of did, so a different aesthetic again. So we've been lucky.
Yeah, and I seen an interview recently with Brian Eno, and he said that James are the best band he's ever worked with, which is quite a thing considering everyone he's worked with.
Did he say that?
Yeah.
Is he on acid?
It is on a James documentary, the Getting Away With It DVD. I think so you can check it out
that's
there.
Funny. Cool. Madness. Yeah, well, I mean, I certainly remember those sessions, the first sessions we had for Laid and were pretty amazing,
And the new album, it's a bigger sound now. It really gets under the skin, with repeated listens like all the best albums do. First track, Zero, begins with the lyric, "We're all going to die."
Yeah.
What a great way to start an album.
Yeah, and I think that might be the best. Well, Laid opened with a track called Out to Get You, which is a beautiful song. But this record opens, I think that's the best opening, one of the best opening track, to a record that we've ever done. I think it's really special, actually. Yeah. It sets the bar very high, I think, for the rest of the record. No, I'm very pleased with the album, and and I think it's great to hear what you say. I would generally say that the feedback, I think people kind of have to remind themselves, fuck me, this is the 16th album by a band. And I don't think it sounds like that. It doesn't feel to me like a band that's just treading water at all. I am sure this record will not be for everyone, but I think everybody who hears it will recognize that we're still, trying to do stuff and, doing good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, James absolutely evolved with each album. Yesterday I watched the video for Recover. It's such a powerful song that tells the death of Tim Doo's father-in-law to COVID.
Yeah.
What's it like for you in the band trying to come up with music for such personal lyrics? What sort of approach do you have?
Well, it's kind of the other way around. So we would get 4 of us, Jim, Tim, Mark, and myself, we get in a room and we start making a noise. And Tim is part of that, obviously. So he often he might come up with complete lines or phrases that find their way through into the end of what becomes a song out of a jam. But oftentimes it's rhythmical or just phonetic. And then he kind of, when the mood of the music is set, then that gives him the opportunity to kind of, in a sense, fill in the gaps. And I think it's the other way around. I think he ends up being inspired lyrically by the mood of the music, in a sense, which he helps create in the first place by being in the room and by jamming along. And, we're all pushing each other, in that sense. But actually, yes, I think it's the other way around, actually.
Do you find it hard to be creative as a band sometimes because the band is spread around the UK and then Tim is in the US?
No, because I think it comes and goes anyway. And I think the fact that it's like that is really good for us. It means that we can't overcook it, We give ourselves set amounts of time. They tend to be quite short blasts of time. I think it gives us a lot of focus and a lot of energy to get on with stuff and be as efficient as we can. We're not the most efficient. I'm not sure that you should be too efficient as a rock and roll band. I mean, I think you can be, a bit wayward and, whatever. That's all, I think, all part of the process as well, really.
My favourite songs on the album are Beautiful Beaches and Isabella Today. Right. The change every day. What can you tell me about writing those songs?
Well, Beautiful Beaches was a jam that we did up here on the northwest coast of Scotland. It became that song, and lyrically, Tim, there was an experience where there was some very vicious fires, you'll remember, 2 summers ago, and last summer also, across California. And that's really a song about people escaping near death, what looks like certain death, actually. So it's a real tale of stuff that's happened to people around him. Isabella was a big, long jam. The second jam that we did in any of the writing sessions that we did for this album, we were in Yorkshire, and it was one of the longest jams I think we've ever done. I actually did a 15-minute version of Isabella as a demo, which nobody could get their head around because it was too long. But in the process of putting that together, the big kind of choir line, which had been played initially in the room by me on a violin, this line, I thought, that's a line, I want to make more of that. So within my mad 15-minute opus version of this, I got the kids round the mic, and we did a big, mad, quite out of tune, but glorious kind of big choir of voices, which becomes not the center, but is a big part of that song, when that big choir comes in. So that's a really good example of how, things morph and different people do things and kind of throw things in the pot, and some of those things stick, some of them don't. But that's a good example of how that stuck. But that sound of all those voices is essentially me and my kids screaming down a microphone in my studio in the garden.
It's a great track. Who does backing vocals on the final track, XYST?
All the kind of chatter and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't actually know where that's coming from. I don't actually know. That's Jackknife at work, up to something.
I love the distorted guitar on that track.
Yeah. It's great.
Was there a particular song on the record that made you realise you were going in the right direction?
Maybe Zero, actually, the opening song. When I heard, and there's another song called Hush, which I think is very successful on the record, which in its earlier, I remember hearing that the initial work that Jackknife was doing on that, and I was like, oh, this is really good. He's getting us, he's got us. It's great. So I think those two are really good examples. But the songs you just mentioned, Isabella, for example, when that started coming together, because I think in the wrong hands, some of these songs would have turned out, or they would have gone a direction perhaps that would not have been good, and we would have been that wouldn't have been helpful. But Jackknife got us, And
then was there a particular song that was hardest to Neil?
No, I think it was all pretty seamless, and we didn't lose anything. So that would imply that things went well, I think, from his perspective and from ours, Is there a particular song that you just can't wait to get out and play live? It's Zero for me. Yeah. We've been rehearsing it, and I think it's going to be fabulous. I like you referenced that opening line, "We're all gonna die." That's the truth.
Yeah.
It's just, what a great way to open a gig, even, maybe.
Yeah, it's a bit like the Flaming Lips track.
Which one?
Do you realise?
Oh, I must know it, but anyway, because I know.
Do you realise that everyone in the world will die? Or everyone will die. It's their most famous track.
Yeah. Well, it's a similar sentiment. Yes.
Yeah.
And a very and it's an observation which is unarguable.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
James have an incredible work ethic. You've put out albums every few years, and you never sit still musically. Always looking forward with fresh ideas. What keeps the band going after all this time?
Truthfully, I think it really is that we don't feel like we've ever fully succeeded, and there's a lot more work to be done. I don't think we don't I think there's very much a sense in the band that, we're not done creatively. We're not, our juices are not dry. So why would we stop, really? We want to keep writing songs with each other. And generally, I think a sense that we never really, we didn't get, in terms of getting our music to a public, I don't think we've written the perfect song yet, and I don't think we've played the perfect show and made the perfect record, and I don't think we're there yet in terms of the potential for the band really to reach an audience. I think that drives us on. We can do more. Why not? We can choose at some point to do less. But whilst we have still the energy to do more, then I think we should do.
The band head out on the road at the end of the year with the Happy Mondays. How much are you looking forward to actually playing in front of a live audience again?
Well, it looks like probably on the 24th of June, we'll get to play at Kenwood House, in London. And that's going to be the first major the first major gig in London for 18 months. That's pretty mad, isn't it? No, I really do look forward. We have some nice shows coming up in September as well. And I think we're in good form. I think there's going to be an explosion. As people get the jab and get vaccinated and get more comfortable with what's going on, and hopefully if we see COVID recede and people's lives go back to some kind of state where they feel more comfortable and people feel like they're okay again, then I think those shows will be huge celebrations, actually. You're
playing Dublin in December.
Yes.
How much do you play? How much do you enjoy playing in front of the Irish crowd?
Well, do you know what? I love it. And I know people will say this because they automatically think they're all the same. And I know that they're not. These are very different cultures because I live in Scotland, so I know what the Scottish culture is. So I don't make that mistake. But there is a similarity between playing, say, to a crowd in Scotland and a crowd. It's essentially a Celtic crowd. So there's essentially a kind of a shared. People see gigs as an opportunity to let their hair down and just celebrate the fact that they're alive. And I think that's something you get when you play in Ireland. We don't get enough opportunities to play in Ireland. I would love to play more in Ireland. I think our music would be embraced very much by the Irish in a way that as yet, up until now, it has not been. So I think that's partly opportunity. It's partly because we're English. Everybody fucking hates us.
No, not at all.
No, I'm joking, obviously. But I would love to play. I was very, very happy to see that we're playing in December, that we're playing in Dublin. We're also playing in Cardiff as well, in the arena there. And I'm like, this is really interesting. Like, maybe, that's quite brave of the promoters to put us on. And it's testament to the fact that they think that people want to go and come and see us. And I think that's right, because the tickets have sold really well. And so, all the gigs will be sold out. And they almost are anyway, pretty much bar the shouting. They were week one of the tickets going on sale. We've done 60,000 tickets across the whole tour, which is remarkable. It's the biggest tour we've ever done. And that's bonkers, isn't it? I mean, I know that's, it's because the Mondays are supporting us. So people I suppose they look at that and go, oh, that could be a cool night out. But so it'll be a privilege. I mean, it'd be a privilege, frankly, at the moment to play anywhere. You know what I mean? So
I would love to see you in Belfast again. I think the last time I seen you playing Belfast was with Suede.
Yeah.
It was quite a few years ago.
Yeah. Outdoor in a square.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great gig.
It was a good gig.
Yeah.
Jesus, that was about 10 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, no. That's what I'm saying. It's been too long.
There you go. Why is it a problem for us to go to Belfast and play? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'll have to ask somebody. I want to go to Belfast and play. And I guess there's this thought that somehow if you go and play Dublin, for example, then you've played Ireland, and anybody who wants to see you from Belfast can go and see you in Dublin. It's a bit unfair, really.
Yeah, it happens quite a lot. But then a lot of bands and artists actually do play both, because
they do.
It's only up the road.
Yeah, maybe our warm-up show we should go and do in Belfast. That's what we should do.
Absolutely. There's plenty of great venues.
No, but of course. Yeah. No. And a brilliant musical ear. And a lot of people are into music with an amazing history of music as well, obviously. So.
Yeah. I'd say being on the road with the Mondays now will be a lot more sensible than it would have been back in the 80s, early 90s. What's the most rock and roll thing you've done on tour?
Well, I suppose the most rock and roll things that happen on tour, we probably wouldn't mention. but I mean, what I will say is that touring is, when you start out, it's like it's amazing. You get to go on holiday, and it's called a tour. And then you kind of grow up, and then you realize it's work, and then it gets a bit more rigorous, and then you get into your 50s, and you're a bit like, it's a job. It's not necessarily that glamorous. The shows are the bit that you live for. That's the bit you want to do. Long gone are the days of a rock and roll excess on tour for most bands, I would say. I've not had a drink for 14 years, for example. So, we're all teetotal and do yoga and go running. In fact, I'm about to go for a run now.
Talking about running, I like running myself. When you go running, do you have a playlist to listen to? What sort of tunes?
No. I just run without headphones. Yeah.
No, I can't do that.
Yeah. I love it.
I need tunes. In fact, your last album was quite good to go running with, the drumming and stuff in it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to run in. I live in a very, I'm fortunate to live in a very wild and very beautiful part of the world. And when I go running, I go with the dog and up into the hills. I just like to experience it as much as possible, really. And how amazingly lucky I am to live on the northwest coast of Scotland. It's pretty special.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. As James approached your 4th decade as a band, looking back, what have been your highlights?
I think working with Eno was a highlight, definitely. And going on tour with Neil Young, opening up for Neil Young for 24, 25 shows was about as good as it's ever going to get, really, for me. He's a huge hero of mine, massive influence also on me. And I couldn't quite believe that we got the chance to go and play with him. Amazing. What a dude. What a musician. Christ. Forget about it. Amazing. So yeah, they're the highlights for me.
Just a few more questions. So I like to ask my guests all these questions. Record Stores Days coming up. How do you consume music nowadays? Vinyl, streaming, or CD?
Not CD at all. Don't have anything to play CD on. So like everybody else, streaming, and like a lot of people, a record player as well, which is great. Obviously there's been a resurgence of vinyl collection, and production as well, which is great. I think they complement each other very much. There's still nothing to beat having a record in your hand, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree. Out of all the music in your collection, which artist or band do you have the most albums by?
Probably Floyd, pretty much everything.
A lot of people say that. A lot of people say Floyd.
There's a lot of sensible people out there.
And last one, which song or album is your guilty pleasure?
Well, not a guilty pleasure at all, but just a real pleasure would be the first Dire Straits album. It's just called Dire Straits, which in my view is one of the greatest records ever made. It's probably slightly better, in my opinion, than the one that came after it, which came out in the same year, the back end of 1979. Dire Straits came out in the early part of the year and has got Sultans of Swing on it. But it opens actually with a track called Down to the Waterline, which I think is the greatest opening track I've ever heard on a record. It's kind of got the sound. He makes his guitar sound like a foghorn in the background, and it just sets a scene, of the docks and Newcastle and all that stuff. And it's a brilliant, brilliant record. They then released Communique, which is a great record. So they did 2 unbelievable records in 1 year. And then they released Making Movies, which is an interesting record because there's only 6 songs. It's amazing. Only 6 tracks on the album. And one of them is Romeo and Juliet, which is just mad. We were talking earlier about Simon and Garfunkel not getting enough respect for the work that they do, but silly. Obviously Dire Straits blew it later on by doing a load of pish. Yeah. But those first 3 records are just amazing. I have no guilt in referencing those records at all. It's not a guilty pleasure. It's just a pleasure. I'm just really glad that they made those records, really, to inspire me to some extent. I mean, I'm a big fan of Californian kind of pop music, and there's much maligned artists who I think made some incredible records, like Steely Dan and people. They're quite cerebral records. They're not really pop. Well, they stray into some pop territory, but they're more. A year or 2 ago, I saw a couple of great documentaries about a kind of mad sub-genre of kind of coffee table soft rock. People call it yacht
rock.
Yeah. And I became really interested in that. because I realized that within the genre were some records that I'd also been brought up with. And as a kid, you just listen to them and you like it or you don't, But what I appreciate about some of those songs is is almost from a technical perspective, how they're put together. I might not even like the music, but I quite like the way that they're put together. And that's the kind of music nerd in me that, appreciates the drum sound or something, whatever. But a bunch of amazing musicians, So some of that would be a guilty pleasure.
Most people say ABBA, but...
See, because I don't get the guilty pleasure. It's like ABBA are one of the greatest bands of all time.
Yeah.
That made some of the most unbelievable... It made a soundtrack to people's lives, which is... they're right up there. They're not in the same category maybe as the Beatles, but they're not far off.
No.
The fucking tunes. And so I don't see any guilt in that. I'm a bit like, I don't get the guilt thing. Like they were ABBA, for fuck's sake. Isn't it the song?
But you were saying about Mark Knopfler, and he can get such amazing sounds out of a guitar. And I don't know whether you're aware, but he did a soundtrack for a film called Cal.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely beautiful soundtrack. It's probably one of my favorite albums of all time.
Yeah, yes, I know that soundtrack. It's very beautiful. That would have been around the same time that Ry Cooder did the soundtrack for Paris, Texas. And a different approach, different kind of film, but equally brilliant as well. That's a Wim Wenders film. Amazing.
Well, Saul, that's my questions finished.
Nice one.
Really, really enjoyed having a chat with you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for your time. And I wish you all the best with the album. I really, really am enjoying it. Like, I enjoy all James' albums anyway, there's something in there for everyone. I wish you all the best with it. And hopefully you get to Belfast at some stage.
Well, I would like to do that. Seriously. Let's see. But thanks for your support. Nice to speak to you, Mark.
Yeah, likewise. And enjoy your run.
I'm about to head off. Cheers.
All right.
Nice one.
Bye, Saul.
See ya. Bye-bye.
The XS Noize Podcast with Mark Millar.